Greetings, loremasters. Tonight our chronicle covers the dusty corners of the spell tome, those forgotten pages of the arcane arts that most Dragonborn flip past in favour of fireballs and lightning storms. We are delving into the magic that seems underwhelming on the surface, the spells you buy by accident or loot from a bandit chest and never cast more than once. But hidden within these seemingly useless incantations are mechanics so broken, so fundamentally exploitative of the laws of Mundus, that they turn the fierce struggle for survival into a comedic puppet show. We're talking about the magic that breaks the game not through raw power, but through sheer, mechanical manipulation. The air in Skyrim is cold, biting at your exposed skin, and the scent of pine and old snow is heavy in your lungs. You can almost hear the crackle of magicka in your palms, that subtle hum of potential energy waiting to be unleashed. Let's be honest, you probably wouldn't survive a trip to the Soul Cairn without some serious enchanted gear and a pocket full of cheese wheels, so having a few trick spells up your sleeve is less of a luxury and more of a necessity. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And while you're settling in, let me know in the comments where you're listening from and what time it is in your corner of the world. I always love picturing the global campfire we're building here. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. We begin our study of the arcane not with a roar of fire or a crack of thunder, but with a subtle whisper to the mind. We begin in the School of Illusion, a discipline often mocked by the brutish Nords who prefer the honest weight of a steel axe to the subtle manipulation of the psyche. Specifically, we are looking at the novice-level spell known as Courage. On paper, Courage looks like the sort of spell a protective healer might use in a massively multiplayer game, not something a lone adventurer needs in the wilds of the Pale. The spell description is painfully modest. Target won't flee for 60 seconds and get some extra health and stamina. In the grand calculus of Skyrim's combat, where ancient dragons can swallow a guard whole and giants can launch you into low orbit with a single club slam, a minor buff to health and a don't run away command seems laughably inadequate. Most players learn this spell, cast it on a mudcrab to level up their illusion skill a few ticks, and then forget it exists. After all, why would you want to buff your enemy? And if you have a follower, like the ever-burdened Lydia, she is likely already charging headfirst into danger without needing a magical pep talk. However, the true power of Courage lies in the passive-aggressive part of its application. It is the ultimate tool for the pacifist sociopath. The game-breaking nature of this spell reveals itself when you realise that the target generally refers to any NPC with a pulse. This includes the cowardly, the weak, and the non-combatant civilians who populate the towns and farms of the province. Picture this scene. You're strolling through Riverwood. The sun is filtering through the leaves, the mill is churning, and the local blacksmith Alvor is hammering away at a piece of iron. Suddenly the sky darkens. A blood dragon descends, roaring with a voice that shakes the earth. In a standard playthrough, the game's AI dictates self-preservation. While the guards might fire a few arrows, the civilians, Sven the Bard, Embry the Drunk, the old woman sweeping her porch will usually cower, flee, or die instantly if they try to be heroes with an iron dagger. But you, the clever illusionist, you do not draw a sword, you do not shout, you raise your hand and cast Courage. The spell visual is a soft green glow, a soothing light that washes over the target. It makes a distinct oscillating hum, like a tuning fork struck underwater. You cast it on Sven. You cast it on the wood elf working the mill. You cast it on the chicken. Suddenly, the AI's flee package is overwritten. The logic gate that tells the NPC you're a level 4 bard that is a level 50 dragon run for your life is completely shattered. The spell forces a surge of artificial bravery into their code. Sven does not run. Sven pulls out a dagger the size of a toothpick and charges the dragon. This is where the game-breaking aspect kicks in. It turns the entire population of Skyrim into your personal meat shields. You can effectively outsource the entire concept of taking damage. While the dragon is confused, roasting a sudden swarm of aggressive villagers who simply refuse to acknowledge the danger, you can stand back, perhaps looting a few barrels or crafting some potions, watching the chaos unfold. It breaks the economy of combat. Combat in Skyrim is designed around resource management, managing your health, your stamina, your magicka. Courage removes your health from the equation entirely by substituting it with the health of everyone around you. There is a grim hilarity to it. Seeing a beggar who moments ago was asking for a septim, suddenly possessed with the spirit of Ysgramor, punching a heavily armoured bandit chief in the face because you magically removed his ability to feel fear. It trivialises encounters in populated areas. Vampire attacks, dragon assaults, cultist ambushes, they all become spectator sports. You are no longer the hero, you're the director of a violent play, prompting the actors to stay on stage when they desperately want to exit stage left. This ties into a fascinating core fact about the mechanics of Skyrim's magic system. Courage is one of the few spells available almost immediately, often sold by Drevis Nelloren at the College of Winterhold or the Court Wizard in Whiterun Farengar, Secret Fire. Despite being a novice spell, its utility does not scale linearly. It scales with the chaos of the environment. A novice destruction spell like Flames becomes useless against high-level enemies. Courage, however, remains effective because it manipulates behaviour, not just numbers. A level 80 Ebony Warrior can still be distracted by a courage-buffed goat, if only for a second. Deep in the lore, this usage of illusion aligns uncomfortably well with the in-universe text, reality, and other falsehoods. This book, which you can find scattered across dusty shelves in dungeons, posits that illusion is not merely trickery of light, but an alteration of the target's perceived reality. When you cast Courage, you aren't just giving someone a caffeine boost, you are fundamentally rewriting their perception of the world. You are making them believe they are invincible titans. It's a violation of the mind. This brings us to a long-standing debate within the community regarding the morality of the illusionist playstyle. Fans have argued for years whether the Dragonborn who uses illusion is actually the most evil iteration of the character. A destruction mage burns you to death. Painful, but honest. A necromancer raises your corpse, disrespectful, but you are already dead. An illusionist, however, forces a father to fight a giant while the mage watches from the bushes. There is a specific kind of cruelty in granting someone the courage to die for you. It strips the NPC of their agency, their survival instinct, and their humanity, reducing them to a temporary asset, and the game engine struggles to handle it. You might notice that when you overbuff NPCs with courage, their pathfinding can become erratic. They might charge enemies they cannot reach, or attack aggressive wildlife that is miles away, simply because their aggression radius has been artificially spiked. It turns the serene, scripted routines of Skyrim citizens into a mosh pit. Consider the Pacifist run, a popular challenge among the player base. The goal is to complete the main quest without registering a single kill in your statistics menu. Courage is the cornerstone of this run, the passive-aggressive bodyguard tactic. You technically didn't kill that bandit leader. The terrified bandit recruit you buffed and healed until he won the fight did it. Your hands are clean, your stats are pure. But the trail of bodies left by your magically induced berserkers tells a different story. This spell also highlights a bizarre quirk with the Rally perk in the Illusion Tree, which buffs courage to provide even more health and stamina. With this perk, you aren't just making them brave, you're making them surprisingly durable. I recall one specific instance in my own travels where a courage-infused mud crab managed to tank a giant's club slam. The crab didn't survive, obviously. It was launched into the stratosphere, joining the Skyrim space program, but it absorbed the hit. That was meant for me. That is the essence of this spell, trading the lives of the world's inhabitants for your own convenience. It's the ultimate expression of the Dragonborn's detachment. You're a demigod, and the people of Skyrim are merely assets to be expended. And the best part, it costs almost no magicka. You can keep a constant stream of bravery flowing into your unwitting guardians, ensuring they fight to the last breath. It is a darker shade of magic than it appears, hidden under a warm green glow and a helpful sounding name. But playing the Puppet Master requires more than just making people brave. Sometimes you need to instigate the fight yourself. You need to take the chaos from a defensive measure to an offensive art form. While courage keeps your meat shields in the fight, our next spell ensures that the fight happens in the first place, regardless of whether anyone actually wanted to draw steel. If courage is the shield of the manipulative sociopath, then fury is their sword, or rather the dagger they slip into someone else's hand. We remain in the shadowed halls of the School of Illusion for this next entry, moving from the Novice tier to the Apprentice tier. Fury is the spell that takes the passive-aggressive groundwork we laid with courage and escalates it into full-blown civil unrest. The description of fury is brutally simple. Creatures and people up to level 6 attack anything nearby for 30 seconds. It sounds modest, perhaps even underwhelming. A level 6 cap, that's barely enough to affect a restless Draugr or a disgruntled Skeever. But the useless label falls away the moment you understand how the game handles crime, aggression, and the fragile social contract of Skyrim's hold capitals. The game-breaking nature of Fury isn't about its level cap, which can be boosted with perks and potions. It's about its ability to generate the clean murder. Let's set the scene. You're in Whiterun, standing in the bustling market district. Nazim is there, patrolling the Cloud District in his mind, asking you if you get there very often. The urge to quick save and send him to the void is overwhelming, a universal experience for any Dragonborn. But murder is messy. The guards will swarm, the bounty will rise, and you'll have to pay 1,000 gold or rot in Dragon's Reach dungeon, losing precious skill progress. It disrupts the flow of the game. Enter Fury. You crouch in the shadows behind the Gildergreen tree. You cast Fury. A red, angry haze envelops Nazim. The visual effect is distinct, a crimson aura that looks like boiling blood. The sound is a sharp, dissonant screech, like metal scraping on glass. In that instant, Nazim's AI undergoes a catastrophic rewrite. His faction allegiance flips. He is no longer a citizen of Whiterun, he is an enemy of the state. Nazim draws his dagger. He doesn't attack you because you are hidden. He attacks the nearest living thing. Maybe it's a soldier, maybe it's a guard. It doesn't matter. The moment he strikes, the entire guard apparatus of Whiterun activates. But they don't activate against you, they activate against him. You have effectively deputized the entire city guard to execute your target for you. You stand up, sheathe your hands, and watch as the guards riddle Nazim with arrows. When he falls, you can walk over and loot his body in plain sight. The guards will say, "Wait, I know you." But not because you're a murderer, just because you have a generic face. You have committed the perfect crime. No bounty, no jail time, no stat increase in the murders column of your journal. This is the art of the clean murder. It breaks the game's morality system completely. The bounty system in Skyrim is binary. If you are seen striking a citizen, you are a criminal. But casting a spell from stealth often bypasses this check, especially if you have the quiet casting perk. The game registers the victim's aggression as the inciting incident, not your magical influence. You are the invisible hand of chaos. The core in-game fact here is that illusion spells, unlike destruction spells, do not deal direct damage. Because no health is lost when the spell hits, the assault flag in the game's code is often delayed or ignored if the caster remains undetected. This loophole allows you to dismantle entire organizations from the inside. Take a bandit fort, for example. Instead of charging in, you cast Fury on the bandit chief from a distance. Suddenly his subordinates, his loyal crew, are his enemies. The fort descends into a brawl. You can sit on a ridge, eating a sweet roll, watching their health bars whittle down. By the time the spell wears off or the chief is dead, the remaining enemies are weak, injured, and easy pickings. You save potions, you save durability on your weapons, and you save effort. But where this gets truly obscure, and where the useless tag is most ironic, is in how it interacts with the essential NPC status. This is a tidbit often buried in forums or discovered by board players experimenting with console commands. Essential NPCs cannot die, they just fall to their knees when their health reaches 0. If you cast Fury on an essential NPC, like a Jarl or a key quest giver, where the game allows, they will attack the guards will beat them down, they will get back up, they will attack again. You create an infinite loop of violence, a perpetual motion machine of aggression that can lock down an entire city indefinitely. It effectively pauses the game world in a state of riot, preventing quests from progressing and shops from opening, all because of one low-level spell. There is a dark humour in the spell's mechanics. The game lore, specifically the text incident at Necrom, describes illusion magic as the manipulation of light and sound to deceive. But Fury goes deeper. It touches the primal brain. It suggests that everyone in Skyrim is just one bad day, one magical nudge, away from homicidal mania. It paints a bleak picture of the Nords, that their honour and camaraderie are so fragile they can be overwritten by a novice apprentice's hex. Community debates often flare up around the illusion assassin build. Is it too easy? Does it ruin the immersion? Some players argue that Fury makes the game boring because it removes the risk of combat. Why learn to block or dodge when you can just make the enemies kill each other? Others argue it is the ultimate expression of a mage's power, brain over brawn. The debate touches on the balance of crowd control in RPGs. In most games, crowd control stuns an enemy. In Skyrim, Fury turns the enemy into a weapon. That is a fundamental difference in design philosophy that makes Fury uniquely broken. Furthermore, the spell creates emergent storytelling that the developers likely never intended. I remember a playthrough where I used Fury on a wedding guest during a certain Dark Brotherhood quest. The ensuing brawl didn't just kill the target, it wiped out half of Solitude's aristocracy. The script broke. Quest markers pointed to corpses. The game didn't know how to handle the fact that the bride was killed by the groom's cousin, not the assassin. It was a narrative disaster, but a mechanical triumph. The audio design of the spell deserves a mention. When Fury lands, there is a distinct unsettling sound, a warping of the air. It's subtle, but if you wear headphones, you can hear the snap of the victim's mind breaking. It adds a visceral layer to the manipulation. You aren't just pushing a button, you're inflicting madness. And let's not forget the synergy with the rage effect of certain poisons. If you're playing an alchemist, you can coat a bow with a frenzy poison, which mimics the Fury spell. This allows you to apply the effect from even greater distances, effectively turning you into a sniper of insanity. You can clear a dungeon without ever entering the first room. Fury teaches us that the most dangerous weapon in Skyrim isn't a Daedric warhammer or a dragonbone bow. It's the ability to turn trust into violence. It renders the concept of allies obsolete. In a world governed by this spell, everyone is a potential enemy to everyone else. You are just the spark that lights the powder keg. So, we have established that you can force enemies to tank for you, and you can force friends to kill each other. But what about the material world? What about the economy? Combat is one thing, but true power in Skyrim often comes from the Septim, and our next spell takes the struggle of poverty, the grind of mining and crafting, and turns it into a joke. It is time to look at how we can break the laws of economics as easily as we broke the laws of social conduct. We leave the chaotic mind games of illusion and step into the rigid, logical domain of alteration. If illusion is about bending the mind, alteration is about bending the physical laws of the universe. And no spell bends reality quite like Transmute Mineral Ore. At first glance, this spell seems like a neat parlour trick, a convenient way to upgrade your crafting materials without dragging yourself back to a mine. The description is straightforward. Transmutes one piece of unrefined iron ore to silver, or silver ore to gold. It sounds helpful, perhaps even useful in the traditional sense. But we aren't here for useful, we are here for game-breaking. Transmute Mineral Ore is not just a crafting utility, it is an economic weapon of mass destruction. It is the spell that turns the Dragonborn into a one-person hyperinflation machine, crashing the value of currency in Skyrim so hard it's a wonder the East Empire Company hasn't put a hit out on you. Let's look at the mechanics. Iron ore is the most abundant, dirt-cheap resource in the game. You can find it in almost every mine, buy it from every blacksmith for a handful of coins, or just trip over it while wandering the wilderness. Gold ore, on the other hand, is rare, expensive, and highly coveted. In the real world, turning iron into gold is the Philosopher's Stone, the ultimate goal of alchemy that drove men mad. In Skyrim, it is an adept-level spell you can find in a bandit camp, specifically Halted Stream Camp just north of Whiterun. This is the core in-game fact that makes this exploit so accessible. Halted Stream Camp is an early-game dungeon. You can clear it at level 3 if you're careful. The spell tome is sitting right there on a table next to a boss chest. The developers practically hand you the keys to the economy before you've even learned how to shout. Once you have this spell, the game's economy effectively ends. You buy iron ore for roughly 2 to 7 gold pieces. You cast Transmute twice. You now have gold ore. You smelt that into a gold ingot. You take that ingot to a forge and craft 2 gold rings. Here is where the loot becomes devastating. Smithing experience in Skyrim is based on the value of the item created, not the complexity. Gold rings have a high value relative to their material cost. By spamming gold rings, you power level your smithing skill faster than almost any other method. You then enchant those rings with something trivial, perhaps fortify sneak or water breathing, using a petty soul gem. This power levels your enchanting skill. Finally, you sell the enchanted rings. This power levels your speech skill. You are leveling 3 distinct skill trees simultaneously, all fueled by the cheapest resource in the game. You're turning 7 gold worth of iron into hundreds of gold worth of jewellery. You become a wandering jewellery factory. You can walk into a town with empty pockets and leave with the merchant's entire life savings and a smithing skill of 50. The useless tag comes from players who find the casting animation too slow. It takes a few seconds to cast and you have to wait for your magicka to regenerate. It feels tedious. But the game-breaking reality is that it removes the need to ever explore for loot. Why delve into a dangerous Dwemer ruin for loot when you can sit in the safety of Breezehome and print money? It renders dungeon rewards obsolete. That shiny glass sword at the end of the Draugr crypt? Worthless compared to the pile of rings you made in 5 minutes. There is an obscure lore tidbit here that adds flavour to this mechanical exploit. The spell implies a terrifying level of control over matter. In the lore, Alteration is about convincing the universe that it is wrong. You're not changing the iron, you're arguing with reality until reality agrees that the iron was actually gold all along. The Breathing Water skill book suggests that Alteration mastery requires a certain level of arrogance, the willpower to impose your truth on the world. Transmute Mineral Ore is the ultimate expression of this arrogance. You're telling the universe that scarcity is a lie. This creates a paradox within the game's world. If this spell exists and is relatively easy to learn, a bandit leader had it after all, why isn't the economy of Skyrim in shambles? Why is gold still valuable? Why are miners still breaking their backs for iron? It is a massive plot hole that the community loves to debate. Some fans theorise that the spell is illegal or strictly controlled by the Empire, hence why you only find it in a bandit camp, perhaps stolen contraband. Others suggest that magicka is too rare among the general populace for this to be a widespread issue. But for the Dragonborn, who chugs magicka potions like water, these limitations do not apply. The spell also highlights the grind culture of Skyrim. Players will spend hours standing in one spot casting Transmute, waiting, casting again. It is the gold farming of single-player RPGs. It turns the epic fantasy adventure into a clicking simulator. You stop being a hero and start being an industrial processor. Visually, the spell is underwhelming. A flash of light, a sound like crinkling foil. It lacks the punch of a fireball. But the inventory screen tells the real story. Watch the iron ore count drop and the gold ore count rise. It is the most satisfying UI interaction in the game for the fiscally minded. Furthermore, this spell completely trivializes the smithing perk tree progression. You don't need to hunt for dwarven metal or orcish armor to level up. You can reach level 100 smithing and craft dragonbone armor without ever leaving the safety of Whiterun, solely by transmuting iron. You skip the intended progression curve entirely. You go from leather armor to the best gear in the game because you flooded the market with rings. It creates a situation where you're technically the richest person in Tamriel, but you are dressed in rags because you haven't bothered to buy clothes. You're a homeless billionaire wizard. And let's consider the weight mechanics. Gold ore is heavier than iron ore. If you're carrying a full load of iron and you transmute it all to gold, you might suddenly become over-encumbered. It is the only spell in the game that can physically pin you to the ground with the weight of your own greed. A fitting punishment, perhaps, for breaking the economy. But wealth is only one form of power. Gold buys gear, but it doesn't buy experience, at least not directly. To truly break the character progression, we need to look at how we gain levels. We need to look at the relationship between hurting and healing. And our next spell takes the concept of mercy and twists it into a grotesque method of self-improvement. We step away from the cold, hard logic of economics and return to the visceral reality of flesh and blood. We're entering the school of restoration, the discipline of healers, priests, and paladins. Specifically, we're examining healing hands. On the surface, this spell is the epitome of benevolence. Its description is warm and inviting. Heals the target 10 points per second. In a standard playthrough, you might use this to patch up your follower after they walked into a trap you explicitly warned them about, or perhaps to heal your horse after it decided to fight a saber cat. It is a support spell in a game that is largely designed for a solitary predator. Without a multiplayer partner to thank you, Healing Hands often feels like a wasted slot. Why heal others when you can hoard the potions for yourself? But the useless label peels away when you realise that Skyrim does not distinguish between a friend and a target. The game engine does not care about your moral intent, it only cares that health points are being restored. And this indifference allows for one of the most twisted, game-breaking levelling loops in the history of the Elder Scrolls, the Infinite Torture Chamber. Here is the setup. You find an enemy. Not a terrifying dragon priest or a hulking centurion, but something manageable. A mud crab stuck in a rock crevice, a bandit whose pathfinding has glitched them into a corner, or, if you are truly committed to efficiency over ethics, the prisoners shackled in the Dark Brotherhood's Dawnstar Sanctuary. These targets cannot flee, they cannot fight back effectively. They are, for all intents and purposes, captive audiences. You equip a low-level destruction spell like Flames in your left hand. You equip Healing Hands in your right hand, and then you hold down both mouse buttons or triggers. The result is a grotesque equilibrium. Your left hand burns the flesh, stripping away health points and generating experience for your destruction skill. Your right hand knits the flesh back together, restoring health points and generating experience for your restoration skill. The enemy is trapped in a purgatory of your making, constantly dying and constantly being reborn, never allowed the release of death, simply existing as a renewable battery for your magical prowess. This is the torture for experience loop. It breaks the progression system by removing the need for combat encounters. Usually you clear a dungeon, you get some XP, and you have to find a new dungeon. The resource, enemies, is finite in the immediate area. But with Healing Hands, a single enemy becomes an infinite resource. You can stand there for hours, taping down your controller triggers or setting a macro, watching your skills skyrocket from 15 to 100 in a single afternoon. It transforms the Dragonborn from a heroic saviour into a sadist of the highest order. Imagine the visual from the perspective of a third party, a legendary warrior standing over a whimpering wolf, blasting it with fire and healing light simultaneously, staring blankly into the middle distance, perhaps eating a sandwich, while the wolf undergoes a cycle of agony that defies the laws of nature. There is a core in-game fact that makes this possible. Experience in Skyrim is often calculated based on base magicka cost and the validity of the target. Restoration XP for healing spells only ticks if the target is actually missing health. You cannot heal a full health target to gain XP. This is why the simultaneous damage is necessary. The damage ensures there is always a deficit to heal, keeping the XP ticker running constantly. It is a perfect symbiotic relationship between hurting and helping. This method also highlights the sheer resilience of Skyrim's NPCs. A bandit can take enough thermal energy to melt a tank, and enough regenerative magic to regrow a limb, all within the span of 10 minutes, and their only reaction is a looped grunt of pain and the occasional, "Is that all you've got?" It turns the combat dialogue into a dark comedy. The community has long debated the legitimacy of this method. Is it an exploit? Is it cheating? Or is it simply clever use of game mechanics? It touches on the grind versus play debate. Some players argue that Skyrim is about the journey, and bypassing the natural levelling curve ruins the experience. Others argue that they have played the opening sequence in Helgen 200 times and just want to reach the level cap to fight the Ebony Warrior. Healing Hands provides the shortcut. Deep in the lore, there is an uncomfortable resonance here. Restoration is often looked down upon by the other schools. Colette Morance, the restoration master at the College of Winterhold, is constantly defensive, insisting that restoration is a perfectly valid school of magic. She is right, but perhaps not in the way she intends. The ability to manipulate life force is terrifying. In the book The Exodus, there are references to the specialized nature of restoration, suggesting it requires a deep understanding of how life flows. To use that understanding to prolong suffering for personal gain is a perversion of the school's tenets that even a necromancer might find distasteful. At least necromancers wait until you are dead. The useless nature of the spell is further debunked when you look at the legendary skill system introduced in later updates. This system allows you to reset a skill from 100 back to 15, refunding the perk points and allowing you to level it up again to gain more overall character levels and health, magicka, stamina boosts. Healing Hands is the engine of the legendary system, because it is so easy to control, unlike, say, two-handed weaponry, which requires finding new enemies. You can legendary your restoration skill dozens of times on a single target. You can essentially reach level 252, the point where you have every perk in the game, without ever leaving that one mud crab int, the river. Let's talk about the sensory experience of this exploit. The sound design becomes hypnotic. The crackle of the flames, fa, pa, fa, mixed with the chime of the healing spell, shing, shing, creates a rhythmic white noise. It's almost ASMR-inducing, provided you ignore the context of what you're actually doing. The visual of the golden beam and the orange spray of fire mixing together is strangely beautiful, a clash of opposing forces held in your hands. There is also a niche interaction with the Respite perk. Respite restores stamina when you heal health. If you're using this torture loop on a follower, say, you are sparring with them, you can keep their stamina topped off, meaning they can power attack you indefinitely while you heal them, allowing you to level up your armor or block skills at the same time. It expands the loop. You become a training dummy and a trainer simultaneously. The most infamous application of this, as briefly mentioned, involves the 4 torture victims in the Dawnstar Sanctuary. After upgrading the Sanctuary, you get 4 prisoners who are permanently bound. They have high health pools and cannot die unless you explicitly kill them. They are designed for this. It is as if the developers knew that the Dark Brotherhood player base would want a gym for their sadism. Using healing hands here feels almost canon compliant. You're a Sithis-worshipping assassin. Why wouldn't you practice your destructive and restorative arts on your captives? But the game-breaking aspect goes beyond just XP. It breaks the narrative pacing. You can enter a dungeon as a novice who barely knows how to hold a sword, spend an hour torturing a skeever, and emerge as a master wizard capable of casting firestorms. The local bandits who were a threat an hour ago are now trivial. You have outpaced the content through sheer repetition, and let's be honest, we have all done it. We have all found that one horse, that one greybeard, that one invulnerable quest NPC, and thought, I bet I can get a few levels out of you. Healing Hands just makes it efficient. It turns the valid school of magic into a factory line of progression. It is worth noting that this spell also trivializes the survival of your companions. In the chaotic mess of a dragon fight, Lydia or Serana will often take a knee, incapacitate. A quick blast of Healing Hands gets them back in the fight instantly. It removes the tension of losing a follower, or at least losing their help for the duration of the fight. You become a necromancer of the living, constantly pulling your allies back from the brink so they can soak up more damage for you. So, we have mastered the art of passive combat with courage, triggered chaos with fury, broke the economy with Transmute, and now we have farmed infinite experience with Healing Hands. We are rich, high-leveled, and manipulative. But sometimes you don't want to cast a spell. Sometimes you want to stab something. But carrying weapons is so pedestrian. It adds weight. It looks clumsy. What if you could conjure the deadliest assassination tool in the game out of thin air? A tool that effectively makes you a ghost. We trade the warm golden glow of Healing Hands for the cold, violet void of oblivion. We are leaving the school of restoration and stepping sideways into conjuration, but we're doing so with the mindset of an assassin. We're talking about the Bound Dagger, a spell that many players gloss over because, let's be honest, by the time you find it, you probably have a glass dagger or a unique artifact like Mehrunes' razor sitting in your inventory. Why would you spend magicka to summon a temporary knife when you have a permanent one that can arguably kill a god? The answer lies in the invisible mechanics of Skyrim's stealth system, a complex web of numbers that governs sight, sound, and, crucially, weight. The Bound Dagger is the silent soul eater, a weapon that technically doesn't exist until the second it enters someone's ribcage, and ceases to exist the moment the job is done. It is the ultimate tool for the ghost playthrough, the game-breaking solution to the problem of evidence. Let's look at the stats. When you cast Bound Dagger, you summon a spectral blade from the realms of oblivion. On paper, without perks, it does damage comparable to an Orcish dagger, not terrible, but not game-changing. However, with the Mystic Binding perk, which is easily accessible early in the conjuration tree, the damage jumps to Daedric quality. You're suddenly wielding one of the highest tier base damage weapons in the game, long before your smithing skill would ever allow you to craft one. You are bypassing the entire material progression of the game. While other level 10 adventurers are swinging rusty iron shivs, you are cutting through armor with the condensed hatred of a Daedra. But the damage is just the tip of the iceberg. The real magic, the useless trait that is actually broken, is its weight. In Skyrim, the noise you make while moving is determined by the total weight of your equipped armour and weapons. A heavy Daedric dagger weighs significantly more than nothing. The bound dagger has 0 weight. It is lighter than air. This means that when you move with a bound dagger equipped, you are mechanically quieter than an assassin using a physical dagger. You are a whisper. Furthermore, drawing a physical weapon makes noise. We've all been there. Sneaking up on a bandit, you unsheath your sword, and the metallic shing sound alerts them before you can strike. Casting a bound dagger, however, counts as a spell. If you have the quiet casting perk from the illusion tree, a synergy we touched on earlier, summoning the blade is completely silent. You can materialize a weapon directly behind an enemy's ear without them hearing a thing. You can slit their throat and dispel the weapon before the body hits the floor. There is no murder weapon to be found. This leads to a specific scenario where the bound dagger breaks the game's scripted tension. Confiscation quests. Skyrim loves to strip you of your gear to make you feel vulnerable. The quest, Diplomatic Immunity, where you infiltrate the Thalmor embassy, or No One Escapes Sidna Mine, where you're thrown into a high-security prison. In these moments, the game expects you to scramble for a shiv or rely on your fists. It expects you to be weak, but they cannot confiscate your mind. They cannot confiscate your magicka. The Dragonborn who knows bound dagger walks into Sidna Mine not as a prisoner, but as a wolf in a pen of sheep. While the other prisoners are sharpening bone shivs and trading skooma, you simply snap your fingers and summon a Daedric tier weapon. You rule the prison block instantly. The carefully crafted difficulty curve of the quest collapses. The guards, confident in their armour, are cut down by a prisoner who seemingly pulled a sword out of thin air. It creates a narrative dissonance where the game treats you as a helpless captive, but the mechanics treat you as an armed executioner. There is a core in-game fact that makes this spell a utility powerhouse: the Soul Stealer perk. This perk casts Soul Trap on any target struck by a bound weapon. Soul Trap is usually a tedious spell to cast. You have to switch hands, cast it, then switch back to your weapon, or enchant a weapon and constantly recharge it with soul gems. The bound dagger automates this. Every stab fills a soul gem. Because daggers have the fastest attack speed in the game, you can harvest souls at an industrial rate. You become a vacuum cleaner for the life force of Skyrim's fauna. You never need to worry about recharging your enchanted gear, because you are constantly generating filled soul gems just by fighting normally. This leads us to an obscure lore tidbit regarding what a bound weapon actually is. According to texts like liminal bridges and conversations with high-level conjurers, a bound weapon is not just magical energy shaped like a sword. It is a lesser Daedra, a living spirit from oblivion, forced into the shape of a weapon by the summoner's will. When you wield a bound dagger, you're gripping a demon by the throat and using its body to kill your enemies. It adds a disturbing layer to the usage. The hum you hear from the weapon? That isn't just sound design. That is the entity vibrating against the constraints of your spell. You are literally fighting with a captive soul. This lore feeds into a long-running community debate, the pure mage versus spell-zerd identity crisis. For years, players have argued whether using bound weapons counts as a pure mage run. Purists argue that if you are swinging a sword, you are a warrior, regardless of where the sword came from. Pragmatists argue that since it costs magicka and uses the conjuration skill, it is magic. The bound dagger sits at the centre of this debate because it allows a mage to utilise the powerful X15 or X30 sneak attack multipliers, usually reserved for the thief archetype, without ever picking up a physical weapon. It blurs the class lines, creating a hybrid arcane assassin that dominates both playstyles. Visually, the spell is stunning. The translucent, spectral purple flame that licks off the blade creates a stark contrast against the grey and white palette of Skyrim's dungeons. In the dark, it acts as a faint light source, not enough to give you away, mechanically, but enough to look incredibly cool. However, this visual flair is also a point of contention. Some players despise the plastic look of bound weapons, preferring the gritty realism of steel and leather. But for the power gamer, the aesthetic is secondary to the performance. Another element of the game-breaking nature is the swing speed. Daggers are the fastest weapons. The bound dagger shares the speed of standard daggers, but has the reach of a sword. A quirk in the game's collision data for some versions chuck patches, though often debated. If you dual cast to summon 2 daggers, your DPS, damage per second, with the dual flurry perk becomes a blur of violet light. You can blend an enemy into a fine paste before they finish their aggro shout. And unlike physical weapons, Bound Dagger never degrades. You never need to visit a grindstone. You never need ingots. Your weapon is always at 100% condition. It removes the maintenance loop from the game entirely. While other warriors are lugging around 10 pounds of repair hammers, if using mods, or constantly fast travelling to Alvor to sharpen their edge, you are free. Your weapon is eternal, renewable, and weightless. The spell does have a useless phase for the uninitiated, the duration. 120 seconds might seem short, but in the frantic pace of Skyrim combat, 2 minutes is an eternity, and if the fight drags on, you just cast it again. It costs a pittance of magicka. The recasting becomes a rhythm, a ritual. Consider the Oblivion Binding perk as well, which banishes summoned creatures and turns raised undead. This makes the Bound Dagger the ultimate anti-necromancer tool. One tap with this spectral shiv, and that annoying Frost Atronak protecting the boss simply pops out of existence. That Draugr Death Lord raised by a trap. Gone. It gives you a delete button for enemy summons, a utility that physical weapons can only achieve with high-level, charge-draining enchantments. The Bound Dagger turns the Dragonborn into a paradox, a heavily armed pacifist, a loud mage who is silent as the grave, a warrior who carries no weapons. It allows you to walk past guards who say, "Keep your hands to yourself, sneak thief," with a smirk, knowing that your arsenal is tucked away in a dimension of pure chaos, ready to be drawn at a thought. But stealth and speed are only one way to navigate the world. Sometimes you don't want to sneak. Sometimes you don't want to fight. Sometimes you just want to know what is on the other side of that door without opening it. Sometimes you want to be a god who sees all, and for that, we need to leave the shadows and open our eyes. Our third eye specifically. Our next spell takes the mystery out of exploration and turns every dungeon into a predictable. We shift our focus from the invisible blade to the all-seeing eye. We are returning to the School of Alteration to examine a spell that fundamentally changes how you perceive the world of Skyrim, literally and metaphorically. We're talking about Detect Life. In the pantheon of useless magic, Detect Life often sits on the shelf gathering dust. New players look at the magicka cost, which drains your blue bar with alarming speed, and decide it simply isn't worth the investment. Why spend precious energy just to see where people are? You have eyes, don't you? If a bandit jumps out, you'll see him then. But this dismissal ignores the immense tactical advantage of what is, essentially, a developer-sanctioned wall hack. The spell's function is stark and binary. You hold the cast button and the world shifts into a desaturated grey. Through walls, floors and ceilings, living beings glow with a vibrant, pulsating aura. Friendly targets shine blue, enemies burn with a hostile red. It strips away the textures of the world, the stone, the wood, the darkness, and leaves only the biological truth. The game-breaking nature of Detect Life lies in its ability to completely nullify the concept of an ambush. Skyrim's level design relies heavily on the element of surprise. The Draugr bursting from a sarcophagus, the Falmer dropping from a ceiling vent, the saber cat stalking in the tall grass. All of these encounters are designed to spike your heart rate and force a reactive panic. Detect Life deletes this tension. Imagine walking into a Nordic ruin. The atmosphere is thick with dread. Cobwebs hang low, and the silence is deafening. A normal adventurer moves slowly, shield raised, checking every corner. You, the Alteration Master, simply pulse Detect Life for a second. Instantly you see 3 red glowing shapes waiting in the next room, 2 by the door, 1 sleeping on a throne. You know their exact positions, their patrol routes, and their facing direction. The dungeon is no longer a mystery, it is a tactical diagram. You can pre-fire an arrow into the doorway before the enemy even renders on a standard screen. You have turned a horror game into a shooting gallery. This spell becomes the ultimate tool for the stealth archer, a build already infamous for its dominance. When paired with the Eagle Eye Zoom perk, Detect Life allows you to line up headshots through dense foliage or thick mist. You aren't guessing where the target is. You're tracking their heat signature like a predator. It feels unfair. It is unfair. You are playing with information that the AI simply does not have. The AI thinks it is hidden in the shadows, but to you, there are no shadows. only glowing targets. But the utility goes beyond combat. This spell is the ultimate lie detector. A fascinating mechanical quirk that often goes unnoticed is how the game categorizes life. Vampires, despite walking and talking like humans, do not register with Detect Life. They are undead. If you walk into the Blue Palace in Solitude and cast this spell, the court wizard Sibyl Stentor will not glow. Everyone else, the Jarl, the guards, the servants, will light up like festive lanterns. She remains a cold, grey void in your vision. You have just uncovered a major lore secret, that the court wizard is a vampire. Without reading a single journal or passing a speech check, you simply looked at her with the right eyes. This application makes the Dawnguard DLC content almost trivial in social situations. You can sweep a room and instantly identify the imposter. It transforms you from a warrior into a paranormal investigator. This brings us to a detail often buried in the game's code, a technical footnote that explains why this spell feels so distinct. The shader effect used for Detect Life is actually a modified version of the Night Eye effect, but inverted and layered with a dynamic entity tracker. It was one of the more complex visual effects for the engine to handle on the original console release, which is why the framerate used to dip when casting it in crowded areas like the Whiterun market. That lag wasn't just your console dying, it was the game struggling to render the souls of 50 NPCs simultaneously. There is a grim voyeurism to it as well. You can see the private lives of Skyrim citizens. You can see the guards sleeping on the job behind a locked door. You can see the thief hiding in a barrel. You can see the children of the Jarl playing tag in the upstairs bedroom while their father discusses war strategy downstairs. It disconnects you from the humanity of the world. They aren't people anymore, they're coloured blobs of data. You stop seeing the faces and start seeing the hitboxes. One of the most entertaining uses of Detect Life involves the Telekinesis spell, which we will discuss shortly. You can use Detect Life to spot a target in another room, and then use the physics engine to knock something over near them, alerting them to a noise without ever being seen. It allows for a level of manipulation that feels more like Dishonored or Metal Gear Solid than the Elder Scrolls. You're playing a different genre entirely. The community has long debated whether this spell ruins the immersion of the dungeon crawl. Part of the fun of Skyrim is the fear of the unknown, the darkness of Blackreach, the twisting tunnels of the Ratway. Detect Life acts as a floodlight that bleaches out the atmosphere. Purists often refuse to use it, arguing that it makes the game too gamey, reducing the rich environment to a binary state of threat or safe. However, for the speedrunner or the power gamer, it is indispensable. It streamlines the looting process. If you're looking for a specific NPC to pickpocket or a quest giver wandering a large city, Detect Life cuts the search time in half. No more running around Windhelm trying to find where Captain Lonely Gale has wandered off to. Just scan the horizon for the glowing blue silhouette. There is also a notable interaction with the Detect Dead spell, the necromantic cousin of Detect Life. While Detect Life shows the living, Detect Dead shows the reanimated, the ghosts, and the vampires. A master of Alteration who toggles between these two spells has total situational awareness. Nothing can hide. Not the living, not the dead, not the machines, which ironically often show up on Detect Dead or neither, depending on the specific enemy type, creating a blind spot for Dwemer constructs. This blind spot is the one weakness of the strategy. A Centurion is cold, lifeless and soulless, and thus invisible to your arcane vision until it steams into view. And let's not forget the Tolfdir's Sextant quest. Well, not a quest, but a recurring moment. Tolfdir at the college is the one who introduces you to the concept of wards and safety, but he also sells this spell. It feels like a subtle nod to his protective nature. He wants you to see the danger before it sees you. It is the spell of the cautious scholar, the wizard who would rather outsmart a troll than wrestle it. But perhaps the most broken aspect is how it trivializes rescue missions. The quest to save Thorold Greymane from Northwatch Keep is a grueling assault on a Thalmor stronghold, or it can be a surgical extraction. With Detect Life, you can locate the prisoner through the walls, identify the path of least resistance, and bypass 90% of the guards. You turn a war zone into a puzzle, and you have the cheat sheet. So, you have mastered the art of seeing through walls. You can spot a heartbeat from a mile away, but seeing is passive. What if you want to reach out and touch the world? What if you want to move mountains, or at least move cabbages with your mind? And what if doing so could turn you into a master of magic in the blink of an eye? Our next spell takes the laws of physics, crumples them up, and throws them across the map. We remain in the School of Alteration for one final spectacular display of mechanical exploitation. If Transmute Mineral Ore breaks the economy, and Detect Life breaks the stealth mechanics, then Telekinesis breaks the concept of time and progression itself. It is the fast travel god mode, the trick that turns a casual afternoon session into a masterclass in power leveling. At first glance, Telekinesis is the definition of a gimmick spell. You find the tome, often hidden in the vampire-infested drug den of Redwater Spring, or amidst the clutter of Ben-Kungeric Great Hall on Solstheim, and you think, finally, I can be a Jedi. You cast it. A beam of energy latches onto a tankard, and you pull it towards you. You can throw it at a bandit for negligible damage. You can grab a coin from a table without walking over to it. It's fun, it's physics-based, but it drains magicka at an alarming rate for very little practical payoff. In the heat of combat, trying to kill a dragon by throwing cabbages at it is not a viable strategy. But the useless label evaporates when you combine this spell with the game's fast travel system. This is where the game engine's logic collapses in your favour. The game calculates skill experience for Alteration based on the duration the spell is active. It also calculates the passage of time during fast travel. A trip from Riften to Solitude takes many in-game hours. Here is the setup for the God Mode glitch. First, you need to reduce the magicka cost of Alteration spells to 0. This is done by enchanting 4 pieces of gear, head, chest, ring, necklace, with Fortify Alteration at 25% or higher. Once you don your suit of 0 cost, Telekinesis becomes free. You can hold a cabbage in the air forever. Now, the magic happens. You stand in the courtyard of Riften. You cast Telekinesis on an object, a dropped sword, a bucket, a piece of bread. While holding the cast button and the object levitating in front of you, you open your map. You select Markarth, the city on the opposite side of the map. You click Fast Travel. The game engine performs a calculation during the loading screen. It sees that you travelled for, say, 10 in-game hours. It also sees that you were casting Telekinesis when you left, and because the cost is 0, you never ran out of magicka. The engine assumes you walked the entire distance across the mountains and tundra, holding that button down for 10 hours straight. It awards you the experience for 10 hours of continuous spellcasting instantly. The loading screen fades, you arrive in Markarth. A deafening sound erupts, the skill level up drum banging repeatedly, overlapping into a chaotic noise. Your Alteration skill shoots from level 15 to level 100 in a single second. You have mastered the School of Reality Bending simply by taking a long walk with a floating potato. This is the ultimate progression exploit. Once you hit level 100, you can make the skill legendary, resetting it to 15 and refunding the perk points. You then fast travel back to Riften. Boom, level 100 again. You can repeat this loop indefinitely. Within 30 minutes, you can gain hundreds of overall character levels. You can unlock every perk in every skill tree. Heavy armor, archery, lockpicking, all fueled by the experience gained from this one Alteration spell. It trivializes the entire leveling curve. You're no longer playing an RPG, you're playing a sandbox god simulator. You walk out of Markarth not as a seasoned adventurer, but as a deity with enough perk points to master every discipline known to man. A fascinating technical detail often buried in the engine analysis is why this works specifically for Telekinesis, and not other continuous spells like Flames or Healing Hands. It comes down to target validity. Combat spells require a valid target, an enemy or injured ally, to generate XP. If you fast travel while spraying fire, the game assumes you ran out of targets immediately, but Telekinesis only requires an item. The item travels with you, conceptually in the math, so the target remains valid for the entire journey. It is a loophole in the validation logic of the creation engine. There is a hilarious irony in the lore implications here. In the book The Lunar Lorcan and other arcane texts, Telekinesis is described as a difficult discipline requiring immense concentration and mental fortitude. The Psijic Order, the monks who can stop time, are the true masters of this art. And here comes the Dragonborn, wearing a mismatched set of enchanted jewellery, warping across the continent holding a singular sweet roll, achieving a level of mastery that sages studied decades to attain. It creates a mental image of the Dragonborn just hovering across the landscape at max speed, eyes fixed on a floating vegetable, ignoring the civil war and the dragons entirely. This exploit also highlights the enchanting alchemy smithing triad. To get that 100% cost reduction, you usually need to have mastered enchanting. It reinforces the idea that crafting is the true endgame of Skyrim. Once you master the tools of creation, the rules of the world stop applying to you. Telekinesis is just the vehicle, the engine is your enchanted gear. The community reaction to this is universally fond. It's known as the Cabbage Mage or Bucket Lord strategy. It's a rite of passage. You haven't truly broken Skyrim until you've power leveled using household junk. It turns the serious, grim tone of the game into a slapstick comedy. You're essentially exploiting the game's inability to simulate the boring parts of travel. However, there is a catch, a useless side effect, if you will. If you drop the item upon arrival, it sometimes retains the momentum calculation from the journey. There have been instances where players release the cabbage in Markarth, and the physics engine launches it at the speed of sound, killing a guard or bouncing wildly around the city square. It's a rare, chaotic reminder of the forces you are toying with. Another lesser-known application, outside of the fast travel glitch, involves the telekinesis arrows added in the Anniversary Edition via the Arcane Archer creation. While technically a different mechanic, the principle is similar, suspending projectiles in the air to fire them all at once. But the classic telekinesis spell allows for a poor man's version of this. You can lift a bear trap, hold it in front of you, and drop it on an enemy's head. It's clumsy, inefficient, and utterly humiliating for the bandit who dies to it. The sound design of the spell is worth noting for its ASMR quality, that low, oscillating hum like a distorted wind. When you layer the level up sound over it 50 times in a row, it becomes a cacophony of success. It is the sound of the game surrendering to your will. But perhaps the most profound realization is that telekinesis is the only spell that allows you to interact with the world without touching it. You can steal the key from a guard's belt from across the room. You can trigger tripwires safely. You can pull loot off a high shelf. It is the spell of the lazy, the cautious, and the clever. But mostly, it is the spell of the impatient power gamer who just wants to reach the level cap so they can fight the Ebony Warrior. So, we have infinite levels, we have the perks, but all this magic requires fuel. Even with cost reduction gear, sometimes you need raw magicka. You need a battery. And what is the most abundant resource you have? Your own blood. Our next spell is a dangerous bargain, a forbidden technique that lets you trade your life for power, creating an engine of infinite energy if you don't accidentally kill yourself in the process. We descend from the lofty heights of fast travel godhood back to the gritty, visceral reality of resource exchange. We are entering the dark corners of the Alteration school once again, but this time the magic feels closer to necromancy or blood rituals. We're talking about Equilibrium. This spell is unique in Skyrim because you cannot buy it from a friendly wizard in a warm tower. You won't find it on the shelves of the College of Winterhold. You have to drag it out of the ruins of Labyrinthian during the staff of Magnus' questline. It sits there, gathering dust in the chasm, a testament to the dangerous practices of the ancient dragon cult. The description is ominous. Convert 25 points of health into magicka per second. At first glance, this seems like a terrible deal. Why would you voluntarily kill yourself? In a game where staying alive is the primary objective, a spell that drains your own life bar seems counterintuitive, earning it the useless badge from players who prefer safety. But for the master of the arcane, Equilibrium is not a suicide button. It is the infinite magicka battery. It is the key to breaking the resource economy of combat completely. The game-breaking loop works like this. You equip Equilibrium in your left hand. You equip a strong healing spell, like Fast Healing or Grand Healing, in your right hand. You hold down both buttons. Your left hand drains your life essence, converting your blood into magical energy. Your right hand uses that magical energy to knit your flesh back together, restoring the health you just lost. It creates a perfect, self-sustaining cycle of misery. You become a perpetual motion machine of pain and restoration. As long as your healing output is efficient enough to outpace the drain, which is easily achievable with a few restoration perks, you generate a net positive of magicka. This effectively deletes the blue bar from the UI. You no longer have a finite pool of magicka, you have a renewable engine. You never need to drink a blue potion again. You never need to retreat to let your magicka regenerate. You can stand in the middle of a blizzard, converting your own vitality into fuel for fireballs, thunderbolts, or paralyzed spells. You are quite literally bleeding for your art. The core in-game fact here is the location and nature of the spell tome. Because it is found in Labyrinthian, a ruin dedicated to the dragon priests, it implies that this was a technique used by the ancient sorcerer kings to maintain their dominance. It explains why dragon priests seem to have bottomless pools of magicka. They are likely tapping into reserves that mortals usually shy away from. Finding it feels like unearthing a forbidden secret, something the modern College of Winterhold decided was too dangerous to teach. But the danger is the best part. Equilibrium adds a thrill to the gameplay that no other spell offers. The community is full of stories, tragic and hilarious, of suicide, wizards. It is very easy to get carried away in the heat of battle, spamming your destruction spells with one hand while holding the equilibrium trigger with the other, only to realize too late that your health has ticked down to 0. You simply keel over, dead by your own hand, while the bandit you are fighting watches in confusion. This creates a high-risk, high-reward dynamic. You are dancing on the razor's edge. You are balancing your life force against your destructive potential. It forces you to watch your red bar as closely as your blue one. It turns the HUD into a vital instrument panel. There is an obscure lore tidbit that suggests equilibrium is a form of blood magic, a practice historically reviled by the Mages Guild. The book The Old Ways hints at the Psijic Order's belief in balance, that power cannot be created, only transferred. Equilibrium is the physical manifestation of this philosophy. You aren't summoning magicka from Aetherius. You are ripping it out of your own biological structure. It is raw, ugly, and incredibly effective. Mechanically, this spell breaks the attrition model of boss fights. In a long engagement with a dragon or a dragon priest, the challenge usually comes from running out of resources. You run out of potions, you run out of magicka, and you are forced to switch to a backup weapon or hide. Equilibrium removes the need to hide. As long as you have health and the ability to heal it, you have ammo. It turns the Dragonborn into an artillery placement that never needs to reload. The visual effect reflects this grim exchange. The casting hand glows with a sickly, pale green light. Not the vibrant green of stamina or the warm gold of healing, but a corrupted, draining hue. The sound is a hollow, sucking wind, like the air leaving a tomb. When paired with the bright light of a healing spell in the other hand, you look like a conduit between life and death, flashing red and gold. Furthermore, equilibrium allows you to power level restoration without the torture method we discussed earlier. Instead of finding a mud crab to hurt you, you just hurt yourself. You can stand in the safety of your home in solitude, draining your health and healing it back up, leveling restoration in peace. You are your own training dummy. It is efficient, safe, mostly, and completely self-contained. It also synergizes beautifully with the Atronak Standing Stone or perk, which absorbs magicka from incoming spells, but equilibrium bypasses absorption because it originates from you. It ensures that even if you have 100% spell absorption, which usually makes you immune to magical restoration, the drain still works, allowing you to manage your pools manually. However, the true game-breaking nature reveals itself when you realize it makes you independent of the loot system. You don't need to hoard potions. You can sell every potion you find for gold. You don't need Fortify Magicka enchantments as desperately. You can focus your gear on Fortify Health, making your battery bigger. It shifts the entire build philosophy of a mage from Maximize Magicka to Maximize Health Pool. A mage with 500 health and equilibrium is far more dangerous than a mage with 500 magicka, because the health mage can convert that durability into damage on the fly. So, you have turned your body into an infinite reactor. You have the power to cast spells forever, but sometimes, raw damage isn't the answer. Sometimes, the enemy is just too strong, or there are too many of them. You don't need to kill them, you just need them to go away for a while. You need a timeout button. Our next spell takes the toughest enemies in the game and puts them in a penalty box made of dust. We travel from the dark, self-sacrificial rituals of Labyrinthian to the ash-choked wastelands of Solstheim. We leave the mainland behind to study under the eccentric, arrogant masters of House Telvanni. Here, amidst the giant mushrooms and the constant fall of grey snow, we find a spell that epitomizes the concept of misunderstood utility. We are looking at Ash Shell. This spell is often ignored by the typical destruction mage because of one specific, frustrating mechanic. It makes the target invulnerable. The description reads, "Target is encased in hardened ash for 30 seconds. Targets cannot be damaged." To a player conditioned by modern gaming logic, where DPS is king, and the faster the enemy dies, the better, this sounds like a hindrance. Why would you cast a spell that actively prevents you from killing the bad guy? It feels like you are protecting them. It feels like you're hitting the pause button on your own victory. But that is exactly why it is game-breaking. Ash Shell is not a combat spell. It is a timeout button. It is the ultimate tool for crowd control, far superior to paralysing cost and accessibility, and it fundamentally changes the rhythm of a battle from a chaotic scramble into a managed checklist. Consider the Deathlord Swarm scenario. You're deep in a Nordic tomb. You kick open a door and suddenly 4 Draugr Deathlords shout at you, ragdolling you across the room. In a normal playthrough, this is a panic moment. You're chugging potions, sprinting in circles, trying to kite them while chipping away at their massive health pools. Enter Ash Shell. You cast it on the first Deathlord. Thwump. He is instantly encased in a grey crusty cocoon. He is out of the fight. You cast it on the second one. Thwump. Now it is just you and 2 Deathlords. The odds have shifted. The useless invulnerability is actually a blessing. It removes the variables. You don't have to worry about dodging the first 2 guys. They are statues. They are furniture. You can take your time dismantling the remaining threats, heal up, regenerate stamina, and then, when you are ready, you let the spell expire and deal with the others one by one. The game-breaking aspect here is the lack of a level cap, or rather, a very generous effectiveness range compared to low-level illusion. Unlike low-tier calm or fear spells which fail against high-level bosses, Ash Shell works on almost anything that isn't a dragon or a massive scripted boss with specific immunities. That level 50 bandit chief who can one-shot you with a warhammer? He is just as susceptible to being covered in ash as a level 1 mudcrab. It trivializes the tank enemy archetype. You simply refuse to fight them until everyone else is dead. There is a core in-game fact that makes this spell a staple for the tactical mage. Ash Shell lasts for 30 seconds, but it can be reapplied indefinitely. You can keep a dangerous enemy in Ash Purgatory forever. If you are fighting a TL duo, say, 2 giants, and you can only handle one, you simply keep the other one in the corner, recasting the shell every 25 seconds. It turns a 2v1 into 2 separate 1v1s. It is the tactical principle of divide and conquer, distilled into a single button press. Visually, the spell is distinct and oddly satisfying. The ash doesn't just appear, it encrusts the target. They freeze in whatever pose they were in, mid-swing, mid-shout, and turn a dull volcanic grey. It looks like the victims of Pompeii. It adds a layer of grim realism to the magic of Solstheim. You aren't just stunning them, you're burying them alive momentarily. This brings us to an obscure lore tidbit regarding the origins of this magic. Ash Shell is unique to the Telvanni wizards, specifically Master Neloth of Tel Mithrin. The lore suggests that this magic was developed as a direct adaptation to the Red Year, the catastrophic eruption of Red Mountain that covered Morrowind in ash. The Telvanni, being the pragmatic survivalists they are, didn't just sweep the ash away, they weaponized it. They learned to weave magicka into the particulate matter of the volcano itself. It implies that when you cast Ash Shell, you're literally throwing a piece of Morrowind's tragedy at your enemy. It is a spell born from disaster, used to create stillness. The community debate around Ash Shell often centres on the paralysis vs Ash Shell argument. Paralysis allows you to hit the target while they are down, which is undeniably powerful. However, paralysis is an expert-level alteration spell with a high magicka cost and a lower duration, usually 10-15 seconds. Ash Shell is an adept spell, costs significantly less, and lasts twice as long. Fans argue that the invulnerability drawback is actually a safety feature. If you accidentally hit a paralysed target with a weak attack, they might wake up or the physics might glitch. An ash-shelled target is secure. You can drop a fire rune directly underneath them and wait for the shell to break, setting up a perfect trap. Furthermore, Ash Shell has a unique utility in saving NPCs. If a vampire attack breaks out in a city, and you see Adriana Avenici about to be mauled by a death hound, you can Ash Shell her. She becomes invulnerable. The death hound can't hurt her. You have 30 seconds to kill the vampire while the blacksmith sits safely in her cocoon. You have used an offensive spell as a defensive shield for a third party. It creates a stasis field that can prevent the frustration of losing merchant NPCs to random world encounters. The useless label also ignores the collision mechanics. The Ash statue is a solid object. You can use Ash Shell to block doorways. If you are being chased down a narrow corridor, turn around, shell the leading enemy, and suddenly his friends are stuck behind his invulnerable body. You have created a living barricade. It breaks the AI pathfinding, causing enemies to shuffle around uselessly while you make your escape or pepper them with arrows. There is a rhythm to using this spell that feels almost musical. Cast, kill, wait, kill. It slows down the frantic pace of Skyrim combat to a manageable tempo. It gives you time to think. In a game that often devolves into button mashing, Ash Shell forces a pause. It allows you to open your inventory, not to chug potions in a panic, but to leisurely select the right poison for the next phase of the fight. And let's mention the Azidal ring interaction. If you wear the Ring of Arcana, also from Solstheim, which gives you the spells Ignite and Freeze, you can set up devastating combinations. You can cast a damage over time effect and then Ash Shell the target. Depending on the patch version and the specific mod loadout or lack thereof, sometimes the Dolti continues to tick underneath the shell, or at the very least, you pause the combat state to regenerate your own magicka before the next volley. But the ultimate humiliation is using it on a boss who is winding up a monologue or a big attack. The game tries to be dramatic, the music swells, the villain raises their sword, and thwump! Statue! The music keeps playing but the threat is paused. You can walk around them, look at the detail on their armour, take a screenshot, and place a rune at their feet. It strips the boss of their menace. They aren't a conqueror anymore, they are a garden ornament. So we have the ability to pause our enemies, to remove them from reality for a moment of peace. But eventually the ash crumbles. Eventually they wake up, and they are still angry. What if you didn't have to pause them? What if you could just tell them to calm down? What if you could rewrite their aggression entirely, not with a shell of dust, but with a whisper of magic that leaves them open to the ultimate betrayal? We return now to the subtle, manipulative prowess of the School of Illusion, but we are graduating from the chaotic brawls of fury and the reckless bravery of courage. We are entering the domain of the mastermind. We are talking about Pacify, a spell that seems, on the surface, to be the tool of the diplomat or the coward. Its description promises a moment of peace. Creatures and people up to level 20 won't fight for 60 seconds. For the average player, this is an escape hatch. You accidentally aggro a guard, pacify him and run away. You walk into a room you aren't ready for. Pacify the room and back out slowly. It is seen as a defensive measure, a way to correct mistakes. But for the true predator of Skyrim, Pacify is not an escape. It is the reset button for the most devastating offensive mechanic in the game, the sneak attack. The game-breaking nature of this spell lies in its ability to force the AI to forgive you instantly. In a standard combat encounter, once you strike an enemy, they enter a combat state. They know where you are, they are blocking, they are shouting threats. You lose the element of surprise, and with it, the massive damage multipliers associated with stealth. A dagger sneak attack with the Assassin's Blade perk deals 15 times normal damage. With the Dark Brotherhood gloves that doubles to 30 times, that is enough to one-shot almost anything if you are sneaking. Once the fight starts, that multiplier vanishes, unless of course you simply tell the enemy to stop fighting. Here is the infinite backstab loop. You creep up behind a Draugr Deathlord. You deliver a devastating dagger strike to his spine. He survives, turns around, roars, and draws his weapon. In a normal game, you're now in a duel, but you, the illusionist, simply cast Pacify right in his face. A wave of soothing, pinkish light washes over him. The combat music stops. The red dot on your compass vanishes. The Deathlord sheathes his weapon. He looks at you, the person who just stabbed him, and grunts. Need something? Or simply stares blankly. He has forgotten the assault. His aggression is reset to 0. You crouch. The hidden eye closes. You circle behind him again. You stab him again. Another X30 damage multiplier. He survives? Pacify again? Stab again? You're caught in a violent loop of abuse and forced forgiveness. It turns the fiercest warriors of Skyrim into confused victims who let you murder them in slow motion. You aren't fighting them, you are dissecting them, and they are thanking you for it. This mechanic relies on a core in-game fact regarding the hierarchy of combat versus magic states. The Pacify effect overwrites the aggression flag caused by damage. Even if you have taken 90% of their health, if the spell lands, the game code dictates they must be chill. It creates a surreal disconnect between the narrative, a fight to the death, and the mechanics, two people standing awkwardly in a room. This strategy completely trivializes the difficulty of boss encounters that cannot be one-shot. Usually, if you fail to kill a boss in one hit, you are punished with a difficult fight. Pacify removes the punishment. It grants you infinite do-overs. You can whittle down a dragon priest or a bandit chief with a series of first hits, never allowing them to actually take a swing at you. Buried within the subtext of the game's library, specifically in the Black Arts on Trial, there is a suggestion that illusion magic is considered by some to be more heinous than necromancy. Necromancy enslaves the body, but illusion enslaves the will. When you use Pacify this way, you are stripping the enemy of their right to self-defense. You are chemically lobotomizing them with magicka for just long enough to slide a blade between their ribs. It paints the Dragonborn not as a hero, but as a terrifying phantom who cannot be fought because his enemies lose the will to lift their arms. This brings us to a fierce community debate. Is the pacifist assassin actually a pacifist? The stats menu might say 0 murders if you use Fury to let others do the work, as we discussed. But with the Pacify loop, you are definitely doing the killing. The debate shifts to cheese versus mechanics. Critics argue that this exploits the limited AI of 2011, claiming that no rational being would stop fighting someone who just stabbed them. Apologists argue that magic is irrational. If a master wizard rewrites your brain to be calm, it doesn't matter if you're bleeding, you are calm. It is the ultimate testament to the power of the spell. The useless tag often comes from the level cap. Up to level 20 sounds pathetic when you are fighting level 50 enemies, but this ignores the dual casting and kindred mage perks. When fully imperked, a dual cast Pacify affects enemies well into the level 70s and 80s. With the relevant potions, you can pacify the Ebony Warrior. You can pacify Karstag. There is almost nothing in the game that can resist your magical command to chill out. Visually, the loop is almost comedic. The transition from the aggressive combat stance, shield up, teeth bared, to the relaxed idle animation is instantaneous. 1 second they are screaming, "I'll mount your head on my wall," the next they are checking their fingernails or eating a piece of bread. It highlights the puppetry of the game engine in a way that is both immersion-breaking and strangely empowering. There is a specific interaction with the Dark Brotherhood questline here. Often, you are required to kill a target in a public place. If you attack, the guards swarm, but if you pacify the guards immediately after the kill, they might stop attacking you. Then, you can holster your weapon and pay the bounty, or use your Thane status, as if it were a minor misunderstanding. Yes, I killed the Emperor's cousin, but look how calm everyone is. It allows for social stealth that goes beyond just hiding in shadows. The sound design plays a crucial role in the rhythm of this exploit. You have the wet thwack of the dagger, the grunt of pain, the rising combat music, and then the shh-wub of the Pacify spell, followed by silence. It is a rhythmic de-escalation. You're constantly spiking the tension and then flattening it. It is a mastery of pacing. And let's not forget the vampirism synergy. If you are a vampire lord, you get a boost to illusion spells. This pushes the level cap even higher. A vampire assassin using Pacify is the apex predator of Tamriel. You are a creature of the night who can walk through a fortress of Dawnguard hunters, stabbing them one by one, and every time they turn to strike you, you simply wave your hand and they forget you are a monster. You become a ghost story that they can't quite remember. This spell also allows for the infinite pickpocket glitch, or rather, strategy. If you fail a pickpocket attempt, the target attacks. Pacify them. Reset their inventory state, mostly. Try again. You can strip a target naked of their gear while they stand there, smiling vacantly at you, stuck in a loop of magical compliance. So, we have mastered the mind, the body, and the flow of combat. We can stop a fight before it finishes. But sometimes, The problem isn't the enemy in front of you, it's the enemy you can't see. Sometimes the problem is the dungeon itself, the dark corners, the hidden levers, the traps. You need a scout. But why send a person when you can send a ball of light that acts as the ultimate distraction? We leave the psychological warfare of the illusion school and return to the utilitarian physical realm of alteration. But we are not moving mountains or reshaping the economy this time. We are looking at something much simpler, something so basic it is often relegated to the status of a screenshot tool or a novelty. We are examining Mage Light. The spell is simple. You shoot a ball of light that sticks to the surface it hits and lasts for 60 seconds. In the hierarchy of lighting options, it usually falls to the bottom. Torches are free and add a rugged aesthetic. The candlelight spell hovers over your head, following you like a loyal pet, providing constant hands-free illumination. Mage Light, by comparison, feels clumsy. You have to aim it. It stays where you put it, meaning you walk away from your light source. For the novice adventurer, it seems like a waste of magicka and a waste of a hand slot. Why throw light over there when you need to see right here? But the game-breaking nature of Mage Light isn't about what you see. It is about what the enemy hears and sees. Mage Light is not a flashlight. It is the ultimate distraction grenade. It exploits the rudimentary curiosity of the Skyrim AI to clear rooms without you ever drawing a weapon. Let's set the scene in a Dwemer ruin. You're deep underground, in the former infested tunnels of Alftand. The air is damp, smelling of rust and decay. Farmer are blind, they hunt by sound. In a standard playthrough, sneaking past them is tense. One wrong step, one heavy boot on metal grating, and they swarm you. But you, the Mage-Light tactician, have a different approach. You look down a long, dark corridor. You see the Falmer prowling at the far end. You charge the spell. It makes a soft, rising hum, and you launch it. The ball of light arcs through the air and impacts the far wall with a distinct, audible thwump. This impact is the key. The game engine registers the landing of the Mage-Light orb as a noise event, similar to an arrow hitting a wall, but louder and more sustained in its investigation priority. The Falmer, hearing the noise, immediately screech and charge toward the light. They swarm the glowing orbs, swinging their chitin axes at the wall, confused and angry. Meanwhile, you simply walk past them in the shadows. You have herded them like sheep. You have manipulated their predatory instincts to clear your own path. It works on bandits too. While they aren't blind, the sudden appearance of a glowing blue star in the dark corner of a room triggers their "what was that" script. They leave their patrol routes. They cluster around the light. This clumps the enemies together, creating the perfect setup for an area of effect spell, perhaps a fireball, or for the pacifist, simply a clear route to the exit. You're playing fetch with deadly adversaries, and they are losing. This utility highlights a core in-game fact that often separates the casual player from the expert: the light-level stealth mechanic. The candlelight spell, while convenient, is a stealth disaster. It puts a literal spotlight on your head, maximizing your visibility score and making it nearly impossible to sneak in dark areas. Mage Light does the opposite. By casting it away from you, you're creating a high-contrast environment. The light is over there. The shadows where you're standing become mechanically darker by comparison, or at least you remain at zero light level while drawing eyes elsewhere. It allows you to use light without compromising your own concealment, but the utility of this useless sticky ball extends beyond distraction. It is the premier tool for the cautious dungeon delver who hates traps. Mage Light has physical collision properties upon impact. If you see a suspicious tripwire in a hallway, or a pressure plate that looks like it might trigger a spiked gate, you don't need to risk your followers' bad pathfinding or waste an arrow. You fire a Mage Light at the floor. Click. The pressure plate depresses, the spikes swing, the poison darts fire. You stand safely 10 feet away, bathed in the soft blue glow of your safety tool. It is the remote detonator of the magical world. It bypasses the need for the Lightfoot perk in the sneak tree, effectively saving you a perk point that you can spend elsewhere. You're disarming the dungeon with photons. There is an obscure lore tidbit hidden in the mechanics of how light works in the Elder Scrolls universe. In the book Magic from the Sky, it is theorized that magicka itself is raw light from Aetherius, filtering through the sun and stars, which are holes in reality. When you cast Mage Light, you're essentially pinning a tiny piece of Aetherius to a dungeon wall. It explains why the light is sticky. It isn't a chemical fire, It is a rupture in the mundane world that anchors raw magical energy to a physical point. You are stapling a star to the ceiling. This concept of anchored light leads to a fascinating community debate regarding immersion versus utility. Many players use lighting mods to make dungeons pitch black, requiring light sources to navigate. In these modded playthroughs, Mage Light transitions from a useless spell to the single most important spell in the game. It becomes a flare gun. It becomes a survival tool. Fans argue that the vanilla game is too bright, rendering Mage Light obsolete for its intended purpose, seeing, and forcing players to use it only for its exploit purpose, distraction. It's a case where the community fixes the environment to make the spell make sense. One of the most terrifying uses of Mage Light is in the vast open caverns of Blackreach. This area is massive, dark, and vertical. It is easy to fall to your death. Mage Light acts as a depth gauge. Before you jump down a shaft, you toss a light. You watch it fall, and fall, and fall. If it takes 5 seconds to hit the bottom, you know not to jump. It is the pebble in the, well, technique but visual. It saves you from the loading screen of shame that follows a gravity-induced death. And let's talk about the sticky mechanic on NPCs. Yes, you can stick Mage Light onto people. While it usually counts as a hostile action, an assault, if you cast it on a follower, they become a mobile lantern. But if you cast it on a neutral target who doesn't detect you, you have just tagged them. In the dark forests of Falkreath, tagging a Spriggan or a bear with a glowing blue ball allows you to track their movement through the dense trees without using the Detect Life shader. It turns the enemy into a walking lighthouse. The visual aesthetic of the spell is also deeply atmospheric. The light it casts is cold, a sharp, clinical blue-white, compared to the warm orange flicker of a torch. It changes the mood of a dungeon. A Nordic crypt lit by torches looks warm and lived in. A crypt lit by Mage Light looks dead, sterile, and magical. It fits the archaeologist roleplay perfectly. You are bringing the cold light of science and magic into the ancient dark. There is also a very specific niche interaction with runes. If you're setting a trap with a fire rune or frost rune, you can place a Mage Light directly above it on the wall or ceiling. The light draws the enemy in. They walk toward the pretty glow. They step on the rune. Boom! It is the anglerfish strategy. You dangle the lure and the trap snaps shut. It turns combat into a purely strategic exercise where you dictate exactly where the fight happens. Sound design plays a crucial role here too. The casting sound is a sharp zing and the flight is silent, followed by that squishy thwump. It feels precise. It feels like a tool, not a weapon. It lacks the roar of fire or the crackle of shock. It is the sound of a professional doing their job. The duration, 60 seconds, is also perfectly timed. It's long enough to clear a room or loot a chest, but short enough that you have to keep moving. It creates a pacing mechanism. You throw a light, you move to the light, you throw the next one. You are leapfrogging through the dark. It stops you from rushing. And let's not forget the sheer joy of decorating a boss arena. Before the Draugr Deathlord wakes up, you can stick 5 or 6 Mage Lights around the room. Suddenly the gloomy crypt is lit up like a disco. When the fight starts, you can see every detail. You aren't fighting in the dark anymore. You have changed the arena to suit your needs. So we have learned to distract, to illuminate, and to trigger traps from a safe distance. We have turned the environment to our advantage, but sometimes visual stealth isn't enough. Sometimes the floor itself betrays you. Sometimes you're wearing heavy Daedric boots that clank like pots and pans with every step. You need to hush the world. You need to silence your own existence. We move from the tactical deployment of light to the absolute suppression of sound. We are still within the deceptive embrace of the School of Illusion, but we are leaving the mind games of Pacify and Fury behind to focus on a spell that alters the physical reality of your own movement. We are talking about Muffle. On the surface, Muffle seems like a spell designed for the amateur. It is an apprentice-level spell, easily purchased from any court wizard. The description is modest. You move more quietly for 180 seconds. Most players look at this and think, I can just crouch. Why waste magicka on being quiet when moving slowly does the same thing? They assume it is a crutch for those who haven't leveled their sneak skill. But this assumption misses the mathematical reality of how Skyrim's stealth engine actually functions. Muffle isn't a crutch. It is a cheat code that renders the entire auditory component of stealth obsolete. To understand why Muffle is game-breaking, you have to understand the noise equation. In Skyrim, your stealth detectability is calculated by two main factors. Visual, are you in the light? Are you in their line of sight? And audio, how much noise are your feet making? The audio calculation is heavily weighted by the weight of your armour. If you are wearing a full set of Daedric armour, which weighs as much as a small car, you're essentially a walking percussion section. Every step is a thunderclap to the AI's ears. Even if you are crouching, the movement noise value is non-zero. Enter Muffle. The spell doesn't just reduce this value, it eliminates it. The magnitude of the standard Muffle spell is 1.0. In the game's code, 1.0 equals 100% noise reduction. This means that the moment you cast this spell, your armor weight becomes irrelevant to the audio sensor. You could be wearing the heaviest plate mail in existence, carrying a backpack full of dragon bones, and stomping your feet, and mechanically, you are as silent as a ghost floating through a vacuum. This allows for the heavy armor assassin build, a paradox that defies standard RPG logic. You can sprint, yes, sprint, up behind an enemy, and as long as they don't see you, they will not hear you coming. You can run circles around a farmer, who, remember, is blind, and it will stand there, clicking its teeth, completely unaware that a tank is doing laps around it. It breaks the immersion of weight and consequence. You have the protection of a juggernaut and the stealth of a master thief, all for the low cost of a single apprentice spell. The core in-game fact that makes this so potent is its accessibility relative to the sneak perk tree. To achieve 100% noise reduction naturally, you need to grind your sneak skill to level 70 and unlock the silence perk. That takes hours, sometimes days, of careful creeping and stabbing. Muffle is available the moment you step out of Helgen. You can buy it from Farengar in Whiterun immediately. You're effectively renting a level 70 perk for a few magicka points. It renders the middle branch of the sneak tree completely redundant. Why spend precious perk points on muffled movement, 50% reduction, when the spell gives you 100% right out of the gate? But the true, useless to game-breaking transition happens when you look at how the spell generates experience points. Muffle is the engine of the Muffle Shuffle, the most notorious power-leveling strategy for the Illusion School. Unlike other spells that require a valid target, like Fury or Calm, Muffle targets you, and unlike combat spells, you don't need to be in combat to gain XP, you just need to cast it. This means you can level Illusion from 15 to 100 simply by walking from Whiterun to Riften, casting Muffle every time your hands stop glowing. You become a wandering noise-cancelling machine. You aren't playing the game, you're spamming a button while looking at the scenery. Within an hour of Muffle shuffling, you have mastered the School of Illusion without ever casting a single illusion on an enemy. You unlock the master-level spells, Mayhem, Hysteria, Harmony, purely by obsessively silencing your own feet. This creates a hilarious disconnect in the hero's journey. The Dragonborn didn't become an archmage through study and perilous duels, they became an archmage because they spent a week really worried about their footsteps. It is the grind distilled to its purest, most efficient form. There is an obscure lore tidbit that ties into this auditory manipulation. The Nightingales, the elite inner circle of the Thieves' Guild, are said to walk with the shadows. Their armour comes with a built-in muffle enchantment. However, the in-game enchantment on lootable boots often only provides 50% magnitude, 0.5, unlike the spell's 100%, in 1.0. This implies that the raw magical application is superior to the physical enchantment. The lore suggests that illusion magic doesn't just stop the sound. It convinces the world that no sound occurred. It dampens the vibrations in the air itself. You aren't stepping softly, you're erasing the consequence of your step. This leads to a community debate regarding the illusionist thief versus the purist thief. Many stealth enthusiasts argue that using muffle is cheating the stealth mechanics. The tension of stealth comes from the risk of being heard, watching the surface you're walking on, avoiding bone chimes, moving slowly. Muffle removes that layer of gameplay. It flattens the difficulty curve. Purists will often refuse to use the spell, relying only on boots and skill, to maintain the gritty realism of being a thief who could be caught. The muffle user, meanwhile, is practically playing in God mode for stealth. The synergy with invisibility, the expert level illusion spell, is where the game truly breaks. When you combine muffle, 100% silent with invisibility, and 100% invisible, you enter a state of total non-existence. You can sprint through the middle of the Civil War battles and no one will react. You can walk right up to a boss, loot the chests behind them and leave. You can play the entire game as a pacifist observer, a ghost who witnesses everything but interacts with nothing. It turns the Elder Scrolls V, Skyrim into a walking simulator. Visually, the spell is subtle but distinct. When active, your feet are wrapped in a swirling dark green mist. It looks like you're wading through a swamp of shadows. It's a great visual indicator that tells you are safe. The sound of the cast is a soft, suppressing whoosh, like a heavy blanket being thrown over a drum. It is the sound of silence being imposed on the world. There is also a fascinating interaction with scripted events. Sometimes the game requires an NPC to hear you to trigger a dialogue or an ambush. If you are muffled, you can sometimes break these triggers. You might stand right in front of a quest giver who is supposed to say, "Who goes there?" But because your audio value is 0 and you're in the shadows, they just stare at the wall. You have stealthed so hard you broke the narrative flow. The muffle exploit also highlights the issue of magicka management. Because you cast it out of combat, the cost is negligible. Your magicka regenerates while you walk. It is a free spell in the economic sense. You're gaining constant utility and XP with 0 resource downtime. And let's consider the vampire synergy again. Vampires get a bonus to illusion and sneak. A vampire with muffle is essentially a phantom. But the interesting part is the necromage perk in the restoration tree. If you are a vampire and have the necromage perk, all spells cast on yourself are more effective. While muffle is already at 100%, the duration is extended significantly. You cast it once, and you're silent for nearly 5 minutes. It removes the maintenance aspect of the spell. It becomes a passive buff that you just refresh every time you enter a dungeon. The spell also works on your horse. No, really. While you can't cast it on the horse directly, there are mods and specific glitch interactions where the rider's stealth state can sometimes confuse the AI regarding the mount's noise, though this is inconsistent. But imagining a muffled horse, a 1,000-pound animal galloping silently, is the kind of absurdity that fits perfectly in this broken magic system. For the player who wants to feel like a predator, muffle is the starting gun. It is the spell that says, the hunt is on. It removes the clumsiness of the early game. You don't have to worry about your heavy iron boots. You're as light as a feather, as silent as a whisper, and ready to sprint toward your next victim. But stealth and silence are defensive tools. They help you avoid the fight or set up the first hit. What happens when the fight starts and you want to watch the world burn? What if you want to melt the toughest enemies in the game, not with a massive explosion, but with a tiny persistent spark that they can't put out? Our next spell takes the concept of damage over time and pushes it to a mathematical extreme. We abandon the cool, silent shadows of the muffle spell and step into the blistering heat of the Solstheim Ashlands once more. We are returning to the excavation site of Kolbjorn Barrow, where the ancient and madness-prone enchanter Azidal buried his secrets. We are talking about Ignite, a spell that does not exist in a tome, but is bound to a specific item, Azidal's Ring of Arcana. At first glance, Ignite is the definition of useless garbage. You equip the ring, you look at your magic menu and you see the stats. Deals 4 points of fire damage per second for 15 seconds. 4 points. In a game where your incinerate spell is hitting for hundreds of damage, and your legendary Dragonbone sword is carving through mountains, 4 damage feels like an insult. It feels like you're trying to kill a dragon with a cigarette lighter. Most players test it once, laugh at the pathetic stream of fire, and throw the ring into a chest in Breezehome, never to be seen again. But those players are missing the single most broken damage scaling mechanic in the Elder Scrolls V. Ignite is not a weapon, it is a mathematical anomaly. It is the infinite burning stack, a spell that allows you to melt the health bars of gods and demon lords in seconds, using a projectile that looks like a candle flame. The game-breaking secret lies in 2 specific interactions, perk synergy and stacking. First, the stacking. Unlike most destruction spells where a new hit simply refreshes the duration or applies instant damage, Ignite's damage over time, DUT, effect stacks. If you cast it once, the enemy takes 4 damage per second. If you cast it again immediately, they are now taking 8 damage per second. If you spam the cast button, and Ignite has a very fast casting speed and low magicka cost, You can apply 20, 30 or 50 instances of the spell on a single target. Now, let's add the perks. This is where the spaghetti code of the creation engine works in your favour. There is an illusion perk called Aspect of Terror, which boosts the effectiveness of fear spells. Deep in the game's code, fire spells are often tagged with a fear component, because burning people tends to make them afraid. If you take Aspect of Terror, it mistakenly applies its flat damage buff to Ignite. Suddenly that base 4 damage jumps to roughly 14. Then you add the Augmented Flames perks from the Destruction Tree, which boost fire damage by 50%. Then you wear a Dragon Priest mask like Azadal's mask, which boosts fire damage again. Through this alchemical mixture of perks and gear, your useless 4 damage per second spell transforms into a monster, dealing roughly 20-30 damage per second per stack. Now, do the math. You cast it 10 times in 3 seconds, thanks to the fast cast speed. That is 300 damage per second, ticking for 15 seconds. That is 4,500 total damage from a 3-second burst. And you can keep casting. You can stack it until the game engine literally cannot. Calculate the numbers fast enough. You're applying a localized supernova to the enemy's chest. The result is terrifyingly effective. You walk up to the Ebony Warrior, the toughest boss in the base game, a man who reflects damage and has massive armor. You don't power attack, you don't shout. You just wiggle your fingers at him for a few seconds. The stream of fire looks pathetic. He laughs, and then his health bar vanishes. It doesn't drop, it evaporates. He melts. The damage ticks are happening so fast that the UI can't even keep up with the red bar draining. There is a core in-game fact that makes this strategy sustainable. Magicka efficiency. Ignite costs almost nothing to cast. While Incinerate, the expert level fire spell, drains your bar in 4 shots, Ignite can be cast dozens of times before you even need to think about a potion. It is the most Magicka efficient damage source in the game. You are dealing thousands of damage for the cost of a novice cantrip. This spell also bypasses the difficulty of aiming. Incinerate moves slowly. Fireball causes friendly fire. Ignite is a hit scan beam, or very close to it, with perfect accuracy and 0 splash damage. You can use it to snipe a vampire out of a hostage situation without singeing the hostage's eyebrows. It is a surgical laser in a game of blunt instruments. The obscure lore tidbit here revolves around Azadal himself. He was the first great Nord enchanter, a man obsessed with mastering the magic of the elves to destroy them. The lore states that his ambition drove him mad and led him to seek knowledge from oblivion. The fact that his ring grants a spell that looks weak but acts devastating is a perfect reflection of his character. It is a trap. It lures you in with simplicity and then unleashes the power of the dragon cult. It suggests that true power isn't about the size of the explosion, but the intensity of the flame. This mechanic is the subject of intense community debate. Is it a glitch? Almost certainly. The interaction between Aspect of Terror and fire spells has been patched, unpatched, and repatched by modders for a decade. The unofficial Skyrim patch usually fixes this, removing the insane damage scaling. This has led to a schism in the player base. Those who play vanilla specifically to enjoy the Ignite God mode, and those who patch it out because it makes the game too easy. It raises the question, if the developers left it in for 10 years across multiple re-releases, is it now a feature? Visually, using Ignite is hilarious because of the lack of feedback. When you hit someone with a fireball, they stagger, there is an explosion, screens shake. When you hit them with Ignite, there is a tiny fsh sound and a small flicker. The enemy often doesn't even stagger. They just run at you, confident, until they suddenly keel over dead from massive internal combustion. It's the Fist of the North Star effect. You're already dead, you just haven't finished, burning yet. The Karstag fight is the ultimate benchmark for this. Karstag is a spectral frost giant on Solstheim with massive health and regeneration. He stomps most level 80 characters into the snow. The Ignite build trivializes him. Because fire stops regeneration and the stacking damage outpaces his massive health pool, you can kill the hardest secret boss in the game in under 20 seconds. It feels like cheating. It feels like you brought a flamethrower to a snowball fight. There is also a tactile satisfaction to the sound design. The spell makes a continuous whoosh sound like a gas leak igniting. When you spam it, the sound layers over itself, creating a high-pitched jet engine whine. It warns you that you're channeling way too much energy through that ring. Furthermore, Ignite synergizes with the Impact perk in the Destruction tree. If you dual cast it, you can stagger enemies, so not only are they burning to death from the inside out, but they are also stun-locked, unable to move, unable to scream, just vibrating in place while their health drains away. It is a cruel, efficient, and utterly broken way to dispatch your foes, and let's consider the weight. A staff weighs 8 units, a sword weighs 10-15, a Zadal's Ring of Arcana weighs 0.25 units. You're carrying a nuclear weapon on your pinky finger. It allows you to carry more loot, more dragon bones, more cheese wheels, because your primary weapon is jewelry. The Ignite build teaches us that appearances are deceiving. The flashy master level spells, Firestorm, Blizzard, takes 5 seconds to cast and leave you vulnerable. Ignite is instant, mobile, and deadly. It is the spell for the Dragonborn who has transcended the need for theatre and just wants results. So, we have mastered the art of the infinite burn. We can melt the offense of any enemy. But what about defense? Sometimes you can't kill them fast enough. Sometimes a dragon opens its maw and unleashes a torrent of fire that fills the entire screen. You can't dodge it. You can't tank it. Or can you? What if the weakest shield in the game was actually the strongest? We shift from the blazing offense of the Ignite ring to the desperate, often misunderstood art of magical defense. We are back in the School of Restoration, standing nervously in the Hall of the Elements while Tolfdir throws fireballs at our faces. We are talking about the Lesser Ward. If you ask the average Skyrim player about wards, you will likely get a groan of frustration. Wards are widely considered the black sheep of the magic system. They are expensive to maintain, draining your magicka bar violently. They have a charge-up time, meaning if you cast them too late, you still get hit. And most damning of all, they shatter. If a bandit hits your ward with a warhammer, or a mage hits it with a high-level thunderbolt, the ward breaks, you stagger, your vision blurs, and you usually die immediately after. They feel clumsy, fragile, and punishing. The Lesser Ward, being the weakest version, blocking a pitiful 40 points of spell damage, is usually discarded the moment the tutorial quest is over. But this dismissal hides one of the most vital, game-breaking interactions in the entire Drakengard repertoire. Lesser Ward is the Dragon Breath Stopper. It is the 10 Septim spell that completely nullifies the most terrifying attack of the most powerful enemies in the game. The mechanic works because of a quirk in how the game engine categorizes damage. Dragon Breath. Whether it is the scorching Yoltor Shul or the freezing Fokradian, is not calculated as a single massive impact like a cannonball. It is calculated as a stream of many small rapid ticks of damage, similar to the flames or frostbite spells used by novice mages. It is a concentration effect. Here is the core in-game fact. A ward, even the Lesser Ward, negates the effects of a hostile spell as long as the ward has at least 1 hit point remaining. Because the Dragon Breath damage ticks are rapid, but individually small relative to the ward's refresh rate and threshold, the Lesser Ward does not shatter. It eats the fire, it eats the frost, it completely deletes the shout from existence before it touches your skin. Picture the scene. You're fighting an ancient dragon on a mountaintop. It lands, shaking the ground. It rears its head back, inhaling deep, preparing to unleash a torrent of fire that deals 300 damage per second. Enough to roast a heavily armoured warrior in the blink of an eye. The warrior would turn and run. The thief would hide behind a rock. You, the Restoration Adept, stand your ground. You raise one hand. A shimmering, translucent blue shield appears in front of you. The dragon unleashes hell. The screen fills with orange fire. The sound is deafening. But your health bar does not move. You're standing in the centre of a blast furnace, cool as a cucumber, protected by the magical equivalent of a pane of glass. This interaction trivializes dragon fights. The breath phase, which is supposed to be the moment of highest danger, becomes the moment of greatest safety. You can walk towards the dragon while it breathes on you, menacingly closing the distance like a villain in a slasher movie. It completely shifts the power dynamic. You are no longer prey. You are an immovable object. The game-breaking aspect is the cost-to-benefit ratio. Lesser Ward is a novice spell. It costs very little magicka compared to its greater or steadfast cousins. You don't need the expensive wards because you don't need to block 80 damage at once. You just need to block the status of being breathed on. As long as the ward is up, the breath cannot apply its damage or its damage over time burning effect. You're using a level 1 spell to counter a level 50 boss mechanic. There is a fascinating obscure lore tidbit hidden in the dialogue of the College of Winterhold. Tolfdir, the master of Alteration who teaches you the ward, ironically, as wards are restoration, is obsessed with the mysteries of the ether. He constantly talks about how magicka flows. The ward spell creates a localized disruption in that flow. It isn't a physical shield, it is a rejection of reality. When the dragon shouts, it is speaking a word of power to change the world. Fire exists here. The ward is a counter-argument. No, it doesn't. It fits the metaphysical nature of the Thuum. You're debating the dragon, and you are winning. However, the community often debates the ward versus spellbreaker issue. Spellbreaker is a unique Dwemer shield that casts a ward when you block. It is arguably the best shield in the game. Fans of the shield argue that it is superior because it costs no magicka, it uses stamina to block, and has a higher ward rating. But the magic user purists argue for the lesser ward because it allows you to keep a weapon or another spell in your right hand. You can ward with your left and incinerate with your right. You can be a tank and a cannon simultaneously, whereas Spellbreaker forces you to be a warrior. The useless stigma also comes from the shatter mechanic we mentioned. It is important to note that lesser ward will fail against a Draugr Deathlord shouting unrelenting force, Fusroda. That shout is an impact, a physical wave. The ward will break and you will go flying. This distinction, knowing which shout is a breath and which is a projectile, is the difference between feeling like a god and feeling like a ragdoll. It requires knowledge, not just power. Visually, the ward is one of the most beautiful defensive effects in the game. It warps the light passing through it, creating a fisheye lens distortion. When dragonfire hits it, the fire splashes around the curvature of the barrier, creating a tunnel of safety. It feels cinematic. It looks like the energy shields from high-budget sci-fi movies. The audio design complements this, a low, steady hum that rises in pitch as it absorbs energy, followed by the crackling hiss of the fire being neutralized. It sounds like a force field holding the line. There is a synergy here with the Ward Absorb perk in the Restoration tree. This perk recharges your magicka when your ward is hit by spells. When a dragon breathes on your lesser ward, it is hitting you with dozens of spells per second. Your magicka bar refills instantly. The dragon is literally recharging your batteries. You can use the dragon's own attack to fuel the thunderbolt you're about to shoot back at it. It turns the fight into a loop of absorption and retaliation that is infinitely sustainable. This spell also renders trap hallways obsolete. Those soul gem turrets that shoot fireballs or lightning bolts in Nordic ruins. You just put up a lesser ward and walk right through them. You don't need to sneak. You don't need to find the disarm lever. You just bulldoze through the trap, absorbing the energy as you go. It makes you feel like an unstoppable force of arcane nature. But perhaps the most satisfying use is in wizard duels. When fighting a generic necromancer or pyromancer, they will try to kite you with frostbite or flames. These are channeled spells. Lesser ward shuts them down completely. You can walk up to an enemy mage, ignoring their desperate sprays of magic, and punch them in the face. It is the ultimate disrespect. It says, your magic is invalid here. The lesser ward teaches us that in Skyrim, defense isn't about armor rating or health pools, it's about mechanics. It's about understanding the code. A piece of iron armor stops a sword, a lesser ward stops the apocalypse. So we have defended ourselves against the mightiest beasts of the sky. We have broken the economy, the stealth system, and the laws of physics. We are a one-person army, but being a one-person army is lonely, and frankly, carrying all that dragon bone loot is bad for your back. What if you didn't have to carry it? What if you had a friend who carried it for you? A friend who never complains, never gets tired, and best of all, never truly dies because they are already dead. We reach the end of our arcane curriculum, the summit of the magical mountain. We have traversed the schools of illusion, alteration, restoration, and destruction. Now we return to conjuration, but not for a temporary blade or a fleeing spirit. We are here for the ultimate expression of dominance over life and death. We are here for the master-level spell, Dead Thrall. To the uninitiated, Dead Thrall seems like a hassle. You have to complete the conjuration ritual spell quest for Finis Gestor at the college, which involves summoning an unbound Remora and bullying him into submission. The spell itself costs a massive amount of magicka. And unlike the convenient Conjured Remora Lord spell, which summons a chatty, decapitating demon out of thin air, Dead Thrall requires raw materials. You need a body, a fresh one. For many players, carrying around a corpse feels like too much work. Why bother managing a zombie when you can just snap your fingers for a Daedra? But Dead Thrall is the only spell in the game that grants you a permanent servant. Not 60 seconds, not 120 seconds, forever. Until they are destroyed in battle, at which point, and this is the game-breaking key, they do not turn to ash. They simply fall down, ready to be raised again. This transforms the spell from a combat utility into the walking backpack, a feature that fundamentally breaks the inventory management system of Skyrim. Here is the Pack Mule exploit. In Skyrim, companions have a carry weight limit. They will eventually refuse to carry your dragon bones. A Dead Thrall, however, is technically a container. Before you raise them, you can open their inventory and stuff an infinite amount of items into their pockets. The game physics might get weird if you try to drag a body filled with 5,000 cheese wheels, but once they are animated, they walk with the same speed regardless of their burden. You have created a zombie that can carry the entire contents of a Dwemer ruin without complaining. But the utility goes beyond storage. Dead Thrall allows for the creation of a dream team. Unlike standard followers where you are limited to one, plus a pet, Dead Thralls stack with your follower count if you have the Twin Souls perk. You can have your housecarl, a dog, and 2 Dead Thralls. That is a 5-person squad. You're no longer a lone adventurer, you're a raid boss with adds. The true game-breaking nature comes from who you can thrall. The level cap is technically 40, without the Necromage vampire boost, but many powerful NPCs fall within this range or can be exploited. This has led to the Pokemon collection phenomenon within the community. Players do not just raise bandits, they hunt for unique NPCs with unique abilities to turn into eternal slaves. Consider Orchandor, the boss of the Only Cure quest. He's a spellsword who can teleport, a mechanic almost no other NPC uses in combat. If you kill him and make him a Dead Thrall, he keeps this ability. You now have a teleporting, vomit-spewing, he uses the Afflicted Spray zombie wizard following you around, or consider a vampire master who retains their life drain spells. You are curating a museum of Skyrim's deadliest enemies, forcing them to fight for you. There is a core in-game fact that makes this essential for gear optimization. Dead Thralls can equip armor you give them. If you find a bandit chief, kill him, and put a full set of legendary Daedric armor with Fortify health enchantments into his inventory, he will wear it when raised. You can customize their loadout. You can build a tank that is mathematically tougher than you are, and because they regenerate health rapidly out of combat, a side effect of the reanimation mechanic, they are low maintenance. This leads to a dark, obscure lore implication. In Skyrim, necromancy is reviled. It is legal in the Empire but hated by the Nords. When you walk into Whiterun with 2 moaning zombies in tow, the guards will comment, "That spell looks dangerous. Keep your distance." But they do nothing. The gameplay creates a dissonance where you are clearly violating the most sacred laws of Nord culture, disturbing the sleep of the dead, yet you are the Thane. It emphasizes the Dragonborn's status as a being above the law. You're walking through the streets with the animated corpses of the Jarl's enemies, and no one dares to stop you. The useless aspect usually cited is the moaning. Dead Thralls make constant guttural noises. It drives some players insane. But for the dedicated necromancer, this is just the ambient noise of power. It is the sound of loyalty. There is a specific interaction with the ritual stone power, which raises all dead around you once a day. While Dead Thrall is single target, it is permanent. The combination allows for an army. You keep your 2 permanent thralls as your lieutenants, and then use the ritual stone to raise a temporary army of fodder during big battles. You become the Night King. One of the most famous community debates involves the thralling of Ulfric Stormcloak or General Tullius. While the game often cleans up these bodies to prevent this, there are windows of opportunity, or glitches, where it is possible. Walking into the Blue Palace with the zombie of Ulfric Stormcloak is the ultimate political statement. It transcends gameplay and becomes a form of narrative vandalism. You're rewriting the ending of the Civil War by turning the leader of the opposition into a mindless luggage carrier. The spell also acts as a storage unit for unique gear. If you give your thrall a unique weapon, like the Giant's Club, which is normally not equipable by the player but can be used by followers, they become devastating. There are followers who can wield weapons the player cannot. A thrall with a giant's club is a siege engine. However, there is a risk. If you leave your thralls in a cell and the cell resets, or if they die in a glitchy spot, you might lose them, and the 500 pounds of loot they were carrying. It adds a layer of Tamagotchi management. You have to check on them. Is Auchendor still here? Yes. Good. It creates a strange bond between master and servant. You start to care about the corpse, not because of who they were, but because they are holding your spare ebony ingots. Visually, the spell adds a purple, necromantic sheen to the skin of the victim. They look cold. Their eyes are lifeless. It is a constant visual reminder of your transgression. And when they die, again, they crumple in a heap, only to be raised, again. It is a cycle of eternal servitude that makes the soul trap mechanic seem merciful by comparison. The Dead Thrall is the ultimate answer to the hoarder mentality of RPG players. We want to keep everything. We want every sword, every book, every potion. The game tells us you are over-encumbered. Dead Thrall answers, no, he is over-encumbered. It outsources the burden of existence to the dead, and so you stand there at the end of your journey. You are the master of the mind, having terrified enemies with courage and pacified them with illusion. You are the master of the economy, having transmuted iron to gold. You are the master of time, having fast-travelled with telekinesis. You are the master of damage, melting gods with ignite. And now, you are the master of death, with two eternal guardians standing silently behind you, carrying the spoils of your conquest. You have taken the useless spells, the ones the other mages laughed at, the ones the guides told you to ignore, and you have used them to dismantle the world of Skyrim piece by piece. You haven't just played the game, you have outsmarted it. So, loremasters, we close the book on these 15 chapters of arcane exploitation. We have travelled from the humble riverwood trader to the peaks of the throat of the world, and in every corner of this province we have found magic that refuses to play by the rules. We have seen that power in the Elder Scrolls is not always about the biggest explosion or the sharpest sword. Sometimes power is a floating cabbage. Sometimes power is a healing hand that hurts. Sometimes power is simply refusing to let the laws of physics apply to you. The Dragonborn is often called a hero, a saviour, a warrior of legend. But through these spells we see a different face. We see a trickster, a manipulator, a scholar who looks at the fabric of reality and sees only loose threads waiting to be pulled. We have learned that useless is just a word for misunderstood potential. We have learned that with the right mindset, the weakest cantrip can bring an empire to its knees. The fire in the hearth is dying down now to glowing embers. The shadows are stretching long across the floorboards of the inn. Outside, the wind howls through the pines, perhaps carrying the distant roar of a dragon, or maybe just the groan of a dead thrall struggling with a heavy load. It is time to rest your eyes, to let the magicka regenerate, and to let the world of Munda spin on without your interference for a few hours. You have done enough. You have broken enough. The game will still be there when you wake up, ready for whatever new chaos you decide to unleash. Sweet dreams.